Right, good morning guys. Welcome to a little bit of an update on the mini projects. So you guys have submitted some initial work that's included the setup of your report template and utilizing a few word skills in relation to the contents page and the cover page and so on. So hopefully you're feeling confident around using those tools. You've also included your client requirements and a prototype of the interface for the design of your tic-tac-toe game. So what I'm going to do is provide a little bit of feedback on the client requirements first off. So now that I've had a chance to look through a range of different examples, and I just want to kind of highlight some of the key areas where we could do with a little bit of clarification. You know, they're a really fundamental part of a computer science project. They need to be really clear, really specific and really well defined, and I just want to kind of highlight one or two areas where across the board we could maybe improve our requirements. Okay, after that I'll do the same thing for the user interface prototypes and explain what I want you to do with the feedback. Okay, so the first thing is obviously how do you actually access the comments and the feedback that I've given you. Well, if you log into Teams, and I'm just going to use Dylan's as an example here. Okay, within Teams you should be able to select the option for comments, and then you should see a list of sort of briefly typed comments that appear down the right hand side, and when you click on them they should take you to the particular part of the report that the comment is relevant to or highlight. Okay, so you can see here, here's the feedback and the changes that I would like Dylan to make to his particular user interface design. Okay, so same thing for requirements further up here as well. They're the two things that I've really focused on. So if I just talk about client requirements first off, a couple of things where we could just tighten up these requirements and make them a little bit more clear and specific. Well, the first place which applies to a lot of people is the leaderboard. So a lot of people kind of set out saying that their game will include a leaderboard, but really in terms of client requirements we need to be a bit more specific and say, well, what information is that leaderboard actually going to contain? So, you know, are we going to include the wins of each player, the losses of each player, just the wins? Are we going to sort of include a win percentage for that player based on the number of games they've played? How are we actually going to organise the leaderboard? So, is it, you know, is the leaderboard going to be sorted on win percentage, or is it going to be sorted on number of games, number of victories in the game, for example, or is it going to be both? Either way, you need to clearly outline that information in your client requirements, so you know exactly what functionality you're going to deliver in relation to it. And also as the client, I also know exactly how that leaderboard is going to look, what information it's going to contain and how it's going to be organized. Okay, so one area where I think most of you need to go back to and sort of just clarify that is around the wording on your leaderboard. You might also want to be specific, and a lot of people sort of mentioning the data that's going to be stored, and saying it's going to record data, but not saying specifically what data is going to be stored permanently. Okay, so again, you know, you could list specifically what data is going to be actually stored, you know, in the text file or in the database, etc., and permanently. Okay, another area where we could just bring a bit of clarity is the intelligence of the game. So again, you being specific there really, because I think I was sort of fairly clear in the interview that I wanted a sort of unintelligent opponent to be able to play against, where they would just make valid moves, but they wouldn't really put any thought into where they located their noughts and their crosses. And then a second level of intelligence whereby you know, if the computer has the opportunity to win, it will place the appropriate symbol in the right square. If it has the opportunity to stop its opponent from winning, it will place, you know, a symbol in the correct place as well. So be specific there in terms of defining what you mean by intelligence in your particular game. Okay, one requirement that I think a few people, quite a number of people missed, and is definitely worth just kind of stating because it's quite an important function of your game, is the ability for it to be able to check who's actually won. So for example, you know, a lot of you will have included this in your flowcharts, but you haven't actually defined it in the requirements that, you know, every go there will be a check to make sure the actual the game hasn't been won by one of the players in there, and defining how that could be done. You could even go to that length if you wish to, in terms of what it will be looking for to do so. Okay, to clarify that. Some of you who I think maybe submitted this yesterday have also now included the validation as a requirement, and I felt that was that's a good thing to kind of mention also. And for some of you, I can understand why that wasn't there initially, but this is often the case in computer science projects. Requirements will sort of unnaturally unravel as the project develops. So validating the name input and validating the number of rounds to be played would be also good. Okay, and then just down at the bottom here, another one that quite a few people missed out: number of rounds, and the fact that I did say I wanted to be able to play sort of matches of best of 5, for example, or best of 7, and the actual user themselves could control the number of rounds that were going to be played within a game. That's also something that quite a few people missed. Okay, so do have a look through your requirements. And anything that I've just said, even if you've not got a comment sort of stating it, do make the appropriate change to your requirements and just see if you can refine them slightly, but not a huge amount of work, and for the most part people did a good job of identifying them there. You might also see that I've sort of pasted in an exemplar set of requirements as well, if you've maybe struggled a little bit more on this task than others in terms of identifying enough requirements and how you word them and make them sound really precise as well. Okay, so do use that to help sort of reword and refine them, because they are such an important thing to get right. Okay. In terms of the user interface feedback, again, some really nice user interface designs and prototypes. You'll see that my feedback kind of hopefully is fairly clear in terms of what I want you to change or add into your sort of revised and improved designs before you kind of jump into construction. So yeah, please kind of do make note of that. Interesting examples that I just want to kind of point out as well in relation to consistency. So and how I want you to actually go about doing this, sort of making the revised and the final prototype. So I'm going to go back to Dylan's project just to kind of give you an example. So if we just go back to Teams. So what I quite like you to do here is get the snipping tool and take a screenshot of your first prototype. And we're actually going to make use of the appendix in your report for this. So we're going to take this down to the appendix. Now I can't actually edit Dylan's report at the minute because I'm not in edit mode, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new appendix entry, and it's going to be called prototype, initial prototype, and it's going to be called appendix B because it's the second entry in my appendix. And I'm going to paste my I've lost the snipping tool. I'm going to paste my initial design. The other thing that I want you to do is go and copy and paste my feedback, so you can hopefully just highlight my feedback that I gave you and paste that underneath that initial design as well. Okay, and then back in your main report, with this now removed, you've now got space to put in your final prototype, which should be again another screenshot of a interface with the improvements that I've asked for included. Okay, and we're just sort of making use of that appendix, for storing, the sort of the rough information, the draft information that we don't really want to have in the actual main body of the final report. Okay, so that's what I want you to do in terms of acting on the feedback. Okay. Last point I'll just make about really good projects, and this idea about being super consistent as well, because that is a characteristic of the best projects. Now, what I quite liked about Dylan's design here is that we've got this next turn feature listed in the top left hand corner, identifying whose go it is, and that's great, but it should also then become a requirement, and that's kind of what happens in these computer science projects, is that requirements sort of come out the woodwork as the project develops. But with that, that essentially is a new feature. I quite like it as the client, so I would say to Dylan, include it in your requirements, because it's now part. That's a deliverable function to get working there. Okay, and I'll also say the same thing with the flowcharts as well, that having this consistency throughout your project, everything kind of is built on the client requirements. So we can see here that we've got some of the information and the update of the board, but this really just reflects a basic game of tic-tac-toe. It's not reflecting some of the requirements around being able to play multiple games and best of 5 games, for example. So do think about that and do try and get that flow chart to reflect what you've specified your game will actually do. Okay, has been a key point. They're what the best projects do. They have that consistency throughout, and it's fine to go back and make changes to requirements in light of developments that have occurred in the design stage. Okay. So last thing for me is just to talk about kind of work for Friday, and in terms of that, I think yesterday we talked about the data table, so that should be completed now and included, and you're not going to have many fields in this particular data table for this particular project because there's not that much input, so don't worry about that. You might only have a couple, that's fine. The flowchart, I think some of you have already covered, some of you still need to do, but that's also due for Friday as well. It needs to reflect your requirements and what you've stated your game will do. And then the pseudocode for how you're going to go about actually checking whether a game of tic-tac-toe has been won or not. Okay, so yeah, the pseudocode method for that. Okay, written using the kind of syntax that you can see below. Refer to Moodle as well if you want some more examples of pseudocode and how to format it correctly. Okay, and here's your bullet point list down at the bottom then. So for Friday, the completed flowchart, completed data table with the validation listed, the check win pseudocode, and the improvements which I've just run through to the requirements, and also your user interface, your final user interface design. In the meantime as well, guys, I'm completely happy for you to get cracking with actually programming and developing this application as well. Yeah, you can by all means make a start on that and begin to make some progress. Okay, and I'll probably ask for some evidence of progress with the actual development of the game early next week. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that clarifies everything. So yeah, that's everything from me. Have a good day.